Hey everyone, my name is Fluxtrance, and I'm collaborating with Paradox Interactive to bring you episode 2 of my map making series for City Skylines. Now, if you're brand new to the City Skylines map editor, or you haven't seen my first video, be sure to watch that first as it covers a lot of the basics. In this episode, we'll be focusing on the general map making techniques that I use when creating a new custom map. Keep an eye out for later videos that'll focus more specifically on realistic terraforming and environment design, but for now, we'll be covering some of the general techniques and ways to speed up the map making process. To kick things off, let's talk about height maps. Height maps are a great way to save yourself terraforming time in the long run by importing a rough outline of what you want your map to look like. I like to generate my height maps from terrain.party, a fan-made real-world height map generator, but really you can feel free to obtain yours any way you'd like. From here, I like to open the file up in a photo editor like Photoshop and adjust the exposure levels until I'm happy with the contrast. The brightness of each pixel determines the height of the generated terrain, so it's a good idea to not crush the blacks or the whites too much, or you'll end up with flat spots. Once you're happy with your height map, click the folder on the bottom left of the preview window in the Import Height Map tab to locate the height map folder. On Windows, you can find this folder by typing %appdata% into your search bar, then navigating to Local, Colossal Order, Cities_Skylines, Add-ons, Map Editor, and Height Maps. Place your .png height map here, and then it should appear under the Import Height Maps tab in-game. After importing, you'll probably notice that your terrain looks a little bit flat. The distance between the minimum and maximum height in City Skylines is quite a bit less than you'll probably need to actually represent your terrain accurately, so this is where a little terraforming and creativity comes into play. I like to start by finding the absolute highest point in the map, then using the level tool to mark the highest and lowest points side by side. This will give you a good idea of the elevation range you have to play with, and then you can think about what kind of map you're actually making, whether there's an ocean or rivers or mountains, and plan the elevation of all these elements accordingly. For mountainous regions with no oceans, like my Tomku Wilderness map, I think it's best to keep the ground level as close to the lowest point as possible so you have plenty of vertical space to work with when creating your mountains. For maps with oceans, I like to start by defining the ocean floor and the land just above sea level with some markers at the max height for perspective. I like to use the level tool with the brush size set to max as a nice way to roughly plan out your terrain elements. Now, the terraforming techniques that you're going to use are probably going to vary from environment to environment, so we'll cover that in the next set of videos, but for now, let's jump ahead to a map with the terrain already complete to talk about the next step. Now, you'll notice that I've kept in mind where I want my transportation networks to go while creating the terrain. I like to draw the first kilometer or so of network for each connection during this process just to make the next steps a little bit easier. At this stage, we can start planning the various network pieces. While roads and railways are pretty straightforward, you've probably seen these plenty of times in the base game, what a lot of people aren't so familiar with are the dotted routes that you draw for boats and planes. Now, contrary to what you might think, you actually don't need to have these routes go directly over top of the hubs that you're going to have like airports and harbors. They really just need to go alongside them. I find it best to think about what kind of angle you want these vehicles to be making as they branch off the route path and head towards their destination. So these are really only access points for the harbors and the airports. Airplanes in particular need quite a bit of space between the route and the actual runway to descend. So running routes too close to these locations will force your planes to spiral down and create that weird kind of spiral pattern as they reach the runway. Once all the networks are in place, it's time to finally start adding detail and thinking about resources. Similar to terraforming, we'll cover this part more in depth in the next videos because honestly, I could spend an entire video talking about plopping foliage in custom maps. Now, if you opt to use custom content at this stage, keep in mind that every workshop item you use needs to be listed as a dependency when publishing to the workshop. So for this reason, try staying organized by creating a collection specific to your map and keep your dependency list as small as possible. If you decide to use grass assets or smaller shrubs, as many people do for maps set in the plains, you'll find that optimizing foliage and performance is a whole artwork in and of itself, and we'll definitely cover this extensively in a future video. But just like that, we are out of time for today's episode, so I hope you found some of these tips helpful. It's definitely tricky to organize all the things I have to say about map making in these short videos, but if you're itching for some more detailed tutorials on specific environments, don't worry, we'll be expanding on this series very soon right here on this channel. But of course, plenty of other content will be coming your way in the meantime, so be sure to subscribe here for more tutorials like this one.